En plus, t'as grossi, c'est terrible, quoi. Puis tiens-toi droite, quoi, ça te fait du bide. Sérieux. T'as des bras tout gros, ça te fait une silhouette toute tassée. Tu te sens pas horrible, là? Avec tes grosses cuisses et ta culotte de cheval, quoi. J'aimerais bien juste te voir avec un corps normal, au moins une fois. Je me permets. Je trouve ça un peu dur, ce que vous m'avez dit, quand même. Eh, les filles, c'est hyper violent de se dire ça. Mais en fait, c'est ce que je me dis à longueur de journée. Et là, je prends conscience de la violence du truc. Elle me disait exactement les choses que je me disais à moi-même dans le carnet, en fait. Lamentable. J'aimerais pas que ma fille se parle comme ça. C'est pas justifié, en fait. Je pense qu'on est toutes très belles. Oui, bien s'aimer, ouais. Simplement. Ouais.
Okay, so I'd like to stop sharing just for a moment. Right, so the premise of the video is that women write in their journals how they treat themselves, and then an actress or two actresses create a dialogue from the journal entries and share it in a way that the original writer hears it. And what happened in your body as you witnessed that? What were you aware of?
In my case, my heart get smaller, like out.
Mm-hmm.
I really know that feeling because I am a woman.
Yes. That's so true. I mean, I haven't shown this to, I think, any woman who's not affected, and it's not to say that men will not be affected also. And it also occurs to me, I don't give a trigger warning for this video, and I probably should, right? But it's very powerful. Thank you, Sonsoles. Anyone else open to sharing what happened for you as you watched?
Maybe some kind of sadness because of what you said, that we all can relate to that, even if it's really, really harsh. So,
yes.
And also there was a point that looked a little bit funny, but also like I thought, well, how hypocrite is that? That we said, excuse me, but also we are on the system and we maintain this kind of cycles.
Yeah, the role that the kind of the culture at large and we as individuals play, and kind of taking this in and maintaining
that kind of, a little bit of anger, maybe.
Anger, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I saw, I see the comments, pardon me, I am having some voice issues. I feel angry for treating us like that, right? So I love so many things about this video. I think I've seen it 100 times, and every time I see it, there's something in the pit of my stomach that kind of clenches in discomfort. And then at the end, as you see them feeling the impact of what saying this to themselves does and seeing it so clearly when they hear other women saying it out loud, like it makes the hairs on my arms stand up. And this is a microcosm of what happens in EFT group therapy. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're in a group of other individuals, and what brings you together is that all of you have an inner critic. For some individuals, the critic may put them down and say terrible things about them and leave them feeling contempt for themselves. For others, the critic may be a voice that scares them, that is a constant voice of worry or catastrophizing that leaves them so shaky and uncertain inside. And now imagine that that is your lived experience, and you're sitting in a group And no matter how alone you think you are in this experience, you start hearing person after person after person sharing an experience that resonates deeply with you, that may leave you deeply uncomfortable as you feel your own self-critical feelings or the impact of them, that feeling of contempt or fear or horror, but infused in it, feelings towards the other, sadness for what the person is experiencing and the impact upon them, anger at their critic. You know, I hear this time after time in the groups that we run, where someone says, usually around session 3 or 4, it's almost predictable. When my critic says that to me, I believe it and I know it's true, but your critic says the same thing. And as your critic says it to you, I know it's not true. And then they sit with that. And it's confusing and it's painful and it's evocative. But this video captures a microcosm of what it's like to be an observer in an EFT group. And then, of course, in our groups, we also have one person doing chair work. So let's talk a little bit more about what happens in our groups and how they're structured. And I'll ask you to just hold on to this feeling that you've had in this moment. I'll try this and see what happens when I do this. Okay, when I do this, can someone tell me what you see? Do you still see video or something else? I tried a different.
I think it's like mirroring the screens, like.
Okay, so you can see some of you and some of the video.
I don't see the video. I don't know if it...
Me neither.
Okay. So you don't see the slideshow. Okay, thank you. I thought I'd try in case I could see a little bit of each, a little bit of you and a little bit of the slideshow, but I don't think so. So let me just share in a different way and go back to the whole screen. There we go. Okay. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about how we run our groups. You know, so for those of you, Soles and Christina, who are in the kind of international EFT group chat, where we're just beginning to build community and come together, you will know that there are many ways that people are experimenting with doing EFT in groups. Laura Gers and I have picked up and kind of run with this model, but this model is not our model initially. This comes from, let me just back up 2 slides. That did not work. There we go. This work is based previously on 2 dissertations by Ivanova and Tweed, supervised. I have to go back and check this now. Laura read the dissertations by, I'm assuming by Les, but a later article by Susan Monouk, Les Greenberg and Joanne Delhante, and then LaFrance, Adele LaFrance, Beth McKaig, and Whistle in 2014. This was a group that was, people started playing with how to do EFT in a group format, and they at first applied it to individuals with eating disorders. And then later, Adele really took this model and tried it out in a hospital setting for people who were on a wait list for outpatient treatment in a hospital setting, offering group format treatment to a hospital wait list, members of the wait list, and gathering some data, mainly qualitative data, but it's an interesting read. So we've taken this model and we've now used it and refined it for 10 years with Toronto students at Toronto Metropolitan University, and I now run this group in my private practice. So today we'll just briefly go over group structure, how we recruit, what we do in early, middle, and the final group, and some brief outcome data. So when I run this group, it's 2 hours long, and the number of groups that we have is dependent on the number of participants. So if I have 6 participants, I would have 8 groups if I run it in a short version. or 11 if I run, or no, not 11, sorry, 8, 16, 19 if I run it in a long version. Depending on your setting, in a university setting, in our context in Ontario, students will only sign up for a short group, not a long group. So we advertise a short group and then offer to extend it, and they always say yes. But basically, the structure of this group is that we have an initial group with no chair work. And then following that, we have one group session for each member where each member gets to do chair work in the group. And then we would have a closing session. If group members agree to stay in the group longer so that each person will have a second turn doing chair work in the group, then we have an interim group where there's no chair work. We consolidate change that has happened. We create new goals going forward. Everyone has a second round in the chairs, and then we end with a final group. We do seek to recruit carefully for this group. So everyone coming into the group has a self-critic. They identify with this idea of a self-critic. As I said, it could be contemptuous or scaring. So this is really if this is appropriate to your setting, a transdiagnostic group. We see a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety. We're also looking for group members who are compassionate towards others' pain. We don't want individuals who maybe feel competitive for who has the worst pain, or who judge others who are in pain in the same way that maybe they judge themselves. So we are looking for group members who experience compassion in their bodies when they witness another person in pain. Each member must be safe and stable in managing their emotions safely. And we'll come back to that in a moment in the exclusions. And they need to be available to attend regularly. When we think of individual therapy, rapport, right, or the alliance between therapist and client is the bedrock of good therapy. If we don't have alliance, we're not going to be able to work effectively. In group, what we focus on is cohesion, group cohesion, a sense of belonging to the group, a sense of safety and belonging in the space. And attendance matters in terms of cohesion. If people are popping in and out, it's like I have a stranger in the group when it's my turn to be vulnerable. So it's important that people can attend regularly. This group is highly experiential, and we do recommend a group long enough to have everyone have 2 chances at chair work. We'll get to that in a moment where that shows up, but it's not always possible. So what makes for a good combination of clients in this group? Ideally, I recommend 6 to 8 group members. We've gone as high as 10, but it begins to feel too big. It's harder for people to be vulnerable, and it's hard to have enough time. Less than that, the group feels very short. Most of the clients need to be able to productively process their emotions so they can already identify feelings in their body. They can tolerate what they're feeling. They can regulate their emotions safely. And they can name and differentiate what they're feeling. So most clients should be able to access emotions at the outset of the group. We've experimented with having a couple, 2 maybe clients at a time who have more trouble feeling their feelings. An English term is alexithymic. They have trouble identifying or labeling feelings. These are often folks who've experienced more neglect in childhood where they haven't really been seen or attuned to. And so the world of others may be a mystery to them, and their own feelings may be something they've learned to turn off. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about the different expectations for these 2 sets of clients in a little bit. We also attend to matching principles and what we call intersectionalities. So in my setting here in Toronto, my preference would be not to have, let's say, 7 straight clients and 1 gay client, or 7 white clients and 1 client with brown skin. It's fine. I can work around that if it happens, but I like everybody in the group to be able to look around and identify with at least 1 other person on whatever aspects of their identity are important to them. Okay, so we can talk about that later when there's time for questions if that's helpful. Who do we not invite into group? Right? So if someone cannot stay safe with strong emotions, if they are engaging in serious self-harm, if they have serious thoughts of suicide, if they're unsafe with behaviors related to sex or drugs or alcohol, this is not the right time for this group. That must be stable first for safety, because this group evokes a lot of feeling. Okay, we're looking for individuals who have behaviors, good social skills, good enough to be in a group setting, and they're able to sort of, as we've said already, meaningfully make sense of their own emotions and express them. Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about what happens in the first group, groups that have chair work, and then the final group. In our first group, everyone comes in very scared. That's very normal. For any of you who are group therapists already, you know this. So in the first group, we focus on really helping people move from fear to a sense of relief. And this is typically what we see. We have introductions, we identify pre-existing relationships if there are any. I can talk about that later in terms of how we deal with them. We try to include some kind of icebreaker or a little bit of levity to help people find a bit of humor or lightness amidst their fear. We review group guidelines. We talk a little bit about emotion and why it's important. And then we split the group into dyads, into pairs. And in pairs, people go through a worksheet, a critic worksheet, where they identify what their critic says to them, how they feel when the critic says that, what they need from the critic to feel better. So people have an opportunity to begin to talk about their own internal critic with one person, which is a little bit less scary for many than talking about it with all 7 or 8 or 9 people. After they've had a chance to talk to one person about their critic, they come back to the larger group and they introduce their critic to the larger group. So we're looking to scaffold vulnerability, having increasing vulnerability through the group, moving from introductions to passive listening as a facilitator talks, to introducing themselves to one person, to introducing themselves to the group. Then we end with debrief, which is really how people were feeling as they engaged in the group process in this group, what's happening in the here and now in their bodies. And we end with checkout. Every group ends with checkout, where we have people name what they're feeling, so identify and name it, identify what they need when they're feeling this, and identify something that may help them meet that need. Right? This is a fundamental change principle, of course, in EFT, is understanding, being able to connect with emotions, understand what we need, and then access what we need. Okay. I'm going to skip, I'm happy to send the slides. So maybe I'll read this one and then I'll skip the other ones, but we've included the voices of some of our clients. After one of our groups, we did exit interviews, asking group members basically what was this like for you? What did you learn? So one of our clients says, what does your critic say to you? Like asking those kinds of questions. It was nice to sit in a group and hear everyone's responses and be like, yep, uh-huh. And everyone was saying in a bit of a different way, but it all kind of came back to the same message of like, you're not good enough, you're worthless, you don't deserve happiness. Like sort of those core messages that I believe about myself. So there's a lot of power in realizing that you're not alone in that experience, and it just isn't something you talk about on the street with your friends. So after the first group, we have one group without chair work, where group members have a chance to get to know one another a little bit. But by the second group, we're starting to do chair work. So each of these middle groups where we have chair work has the same structure. We have a check-in. A check-in is where people indicate how they're feeling as they enter the group space. It's very helpful to know if someone is coming in angry because of a fight with a partner or a friend, coming in sad because of a loss, coming in stressed and fatigued. In this group, many will have social anxiety or depression. They may be prone to personalizing others' emotional responses. And it can be helpful to know that someone is coming in with feelings based on their own life, not their reaction to another group member. So people check in, identify how they're feeling, and then we ask for a volunteer. we always get one. The volunteer is volunteering to do chair work with the lead facilitator. Because we always have 2 facilitators in this group. We can talk about how to share the chair work later on. Typically, either one person does all the chair work. So I typically work with a student and I do the chair work throughout the group. The student gets to watch live chair work every week, which they tend to love. Sometimes Laura Gers and we do the trainings together. We have worked together in the group and we alternate week by week. One of us does the chair work one week and the other does the chair work the following week. So we do 30 to 40 minutes of a critic split task at the front of the group. After the chair work is done, we come back into the larger group format, and the observers have been tasked with, as they listen, paying attention to how they feel as they witness the chair work. Much like I asked each of you to pay attention to how you felt as you witnessed the video that we watched. So during this segment, people are sharing with the volunteer who's just completed chair work how they were touched by their work, how they felt as they witnessed. Right? And this is often very poignant as people are disclosing how they deeply identified with what the chair participant, the volunteer, had experienced or expressed. Often they're angry at the person's critic, and they may feel deep compassion for the volunteer client themselves. And then we end with checkout, where people again are identifying what they feel, what they need, and how to meet that need. So if we think about, let me stop sharing for just one moment. If we think about, my apologies, there we go. If we think about, well, here's how I think about the fundamental change process in emotion-focused therapy, right? Individuals encounter a stimulus in their life. And when encountering that stimulus, when it's problematic, a primary maladaptive emotion scheme is evoked, something like shame or core fear or lonely abandonment, right? And now this emotion scheme is organizing their thinking, their behavior, the memories they have access to while it's evoked. In EFT, one of the core things that we do is help people evoke their primary maladaptive emotion scheme, and through our tasks, help them to evoke a primary adaptive here and now emotion. This might be self-compassion or confidence or assertive anger. And through repeated co-activation of primary maladaptive and primary adaptive emotion, we know from basic neuroscience that neurons that fire together wire together, okay? And if we can do this enough times, and eventually when the client runs into that stimulus, their experience is not having a primary maladaptive emotion and learning to behaviorally downregulate it or cope with it. Right? This is what so many of our clients come into therapy doing, and they're exhausted. Rather, they have the stimulus and they feel this. And this isn't shame pride or fear anger. That's not a thing. It's just a new regulated emotional response. Okay, so when we think of memory theory, we've helped individuals access episodic memory from past episodes in their life. And while we cannot change the past, we can change the emotional arousal when a memory is evoked. Okay, so now when I run into a stimulus, I'm not experiencing some old stuck memory from a past relational injury. I'm experiencing a new emotion that's more relevant to my present life, rather than stemming from my past life. Does that make sense? So in group, week after week after week, whether someone's doing chair work or witnessing chair work, they get activated in their core fear or their core shame. If I'm witnessing someone doing core shame work and my primary maladaptive emotion scheme is shame, I feel my shame too. Just listening to someone else's shame evokes my shame as I think about how I resonate or what it was like for me or the ways I don't like myself. Just like the women in the video were horrified and feeling their own shame as the actress spoke their criticism aloud. Okay? In the course of the group, then I feel whatever my core maladaptive emotion is. And as I witness or as I experience chair work, I also start to feel a sort of anger at my own critic or someone else's, compassion for someone else's experience of being hurt by their critic, or self-compassion for myself. I may feel relief, but each week we have strong pairing of primary maladaptive and primary adaptive emotion. And typically by about halfway through the group, we start hearing narratives shift. Right? So I'm working with a student now trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. And in this group, we're not teaching people anything. We're not teaching how to recognize thoughts. We're not teaching how to change thoughts. We're not teaching a script or a task for how to change emotions. Rather, individuals are having rich emotional experience every week. And we're halfway through the group. And now during check-in, and as we talk about how are you feeling as you come in and what have you noticed since last week, the stories are coming. I don't know why, but I've actually felt a bit kinder to myself, or I don't know why I didn't expect this, but I wasn't quite so scared going into a meeting. Or I was scared, but I went in and I spoke anyway. They're beginning to talk about behavior changes. They're beginning to talk about emotional changes. Right? And this surprises my student because we haven't taught them anything. But it doesn't surprise me because they've done this for 6 weeks and it's beginning to have an impact. Okay. So let me just pause there briefly. Any questions? And then I'm going to rush through other major structural pieces of the group. But I see one. Thank you. A couple. Okay.
Okay, so we have like 30 or 40 minutes to do the chair work.
Yes.
But what if the patient collapse?
Mm-hmm.
In practice, like in real life, the other members of the group are a tool to, in some way, achieve the adaptive emotion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Love it. You just anticipated like 20 slides ahead. Exactly. No, but this is perfect, right? I love that you're seeing this so clearly. So there are some differences in chair work between, right, and I see that our call will end in 15 minutes. Good to know. There are some differences in chair work in individual versus group therapy. One of them is that in the group, our focus is really trying to help someone within their window of tolerance. We're not looking to traumatize a group member or bring them where they can't or don't want to go, ever. But often by the time we start chair work, safety establishes fairly quickly. So we want to actually bring someone into their primary maladaptive emotion in the chair work, right? So the stimulus is their critic, and our focus as a facilitator is to deepen the primary maladaptive emotion. If we have time for full task resolution, that's great. That's wonderful. That's an asset. But if we don't, it's okay. If someone moves into their pain and we can at least get to an articulation of the need, and we've run out of time, we acknowledge the need, we acknowledge the poignancy. And as the other group members reflect on the pain, this is why we've chosen group members who feel compassionate towards another's pain, right? And we're very explicit in choosing this. The other group members reliably come in with beautiful support. It broke my heart to hear how much you struggle. I'm so sad for the pain that you hold, but I also feel it myself and my stomach is in knots and I was fighting tears because that's how I treat myself. And I can't believe how hard this is. And I wish I could give you a hug, right? These beautiful things happen. And it's not therapist to client. I don't know how many of you have ever had a client say to you, because I have, well, you have to be nice to me, it's your job. Or you have to be kind, you're paid to be. And it's like there are these creative ways of undermining what a therapist will say to a client when someone cannot accept self-compassion. But when you hear these things from a stranger who has they don't owe you anything. They are a group of strangers who've come together in the room. I find that people can't dismiss it or undermine it in the same way. And to be fair, most of my clients are able to accept compassion from me. But once in a while, there's someone who has a terrible critic who can't. But there's something about hearing this from a stranger. I think it's also the authenticity. As a therapist, I'm in my therapist role. So I may have compassion, but I'm not self-disclosing my deep process. But when a stranger says to you with tears on their face, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that out loud. That's what I live with in my head every day, and I'm so ashamed of it. And I don't even have words right now for what you just did, but it was so brave, and I can't quite breathe." Right? That hits you viscerally, right? It is emotion to emotion. Right? So this is anyway part of the power of this group. So yes, thank you. There was another question.
Sorry, this is powerful, Sarah. I love it. I got more time because I do the subscription right now, so you can relax.
Okay, thank you. That's wonderful. Actually, then I will. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Sonsoles. I appreciate it. Okay. Does anybody have another question then that they want to ask now, or shall I go back into the slides? Yeah, Christina.
It's. I only wanted to say that it feels very exciting to hear about all this, how powerful this can be, and it feels very encouraging to see that you can reach so many patients at once. Because
yes.
Also economically, I think it's very interesting that sometimes people can't afford an individual therapy, but it would be easier to reach them in a group therapy, or sometimes people don't want to do an individual therapy, but they would feel more comfortable like this. And also I wanted to say that I see lots of connections between EFT and mindful self-compassion, how the common humanity helps us, and how compassion is a way to self-compassion as well. And I don't know, I just feel very excited.
I love that.
And maybe later you can tell us about the los talleres, the workshops.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure, I will. Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lauren, did you also have a question? I don't want to put you on the spot. And okay. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, let me go back to the slides then, and we'll continue. Okay. Okay, so, okay, if I have time, then maybe I'll read this as well. So here's another in members' own words. There's always someone that's really brave that does it, goes first. And they really just then shatter all the assumptions and feelings of, the unsure feeling that everyone has. Like they help to dispel all of that. Yeah, and then we get right into it. That's the thing in my experience. It's only momentarily in the beginning that you're unsure and scared. And then when you see someone get up and do all that chair work, it's like so intense and emotional, and you get really drawn into their story. And really, when we all come together and talk about it, people just start opening up, and they're so compassionate and they're so loving. And we just really want that person to feel like, oh, you're not alone. We're here for you. We're outraged for you. We're, it's just everything. We want to support them. So you kind of forget about all those thoughts at the beginning. Right? And this speaks in a way to the importance of the first person. So I will say that we often try to, an English expression is load the dice. We try to increase the probability that someone who can already deeply access their emotions and is comfortable enough with vulnerability that their body allows them to be vulnerable in the group, as opposed to someone who may wish they could be vulnerable, but their body goes into dissociation or self-interruption in the group. We want someone to go first who is going to be able to feel and express their feelings, because this really sets the tone for later group experiences. it's like it implicitly gives permission for people to share their feelings. And I think what happens is when that first person goes and there is a lot of poignancy and there is a lot of emotion, there's a fair bit that gets, well, there's a lot that gets evoked in the listeners. They lean in with compassion. And then those people whose bodies are more afraid of being vulnerable, they have an opportunity to experience how caring the group was in the face of another's pain. And it makes it easier for them to then be vulnerable when it's their turn and to get more out of the process. So often at the intake, and I'll talk about intake in a moment, actually I'll hold off and I'll come back to this when I talk about intake and how we have that conversation. Okay. The final group, so everybody has had one chance in the chairs. If we're doing a shorter group, if that's what the group has agreed to, the final group, there is no chair work. And our focus is really on reviewing and consolidating the change process and identifying next steps. So we'll have people share their narratives around how they felt coming in at the beginning of the group and what changes they've noticed, good or bad, throughout the group. And now, given this experience, are there things that they want to continue to work on? We've done a variety of different tasks in the final group. Sometimes when it's in person, as I mentioned, in the very first group, people pair off in dyads and they introduce their critics to one another with a worksheet. So sometimes we collect those worksheets, and at the end of the group, in the final group, we give each person their worksheet back and they can review it and see what's changed. Sometimes people are very surprised by how much has changed, which I think is an interesting side effect sometimes of good EFT, where people aren't even necessarily aware of the change yet in their narrative or their identity, but their nervous system is beginning to respond differently. We've had people asked to share food in the final group, and we've done potlucks. We have done exercises where everybody writes their name at the top of a sheet and they pass the sheet around from person to person to person, and everyone writes on everybody else's sheet something about them. Typically we invite feedback along the lines of, how have you seen this person grow? Or what will you carry with you from your interactions with this person? So it's usually quite lovely, and they have that to carry away with them. So the final group is about closure. If you're in a setting where your group is open to a longer group, instead of a final group at this point, we have a pause in chair work, and we do some consolidation of what the change process has been to date. And then we have a different worksheet that we go through where people identify markers for their second round in the chairs. So I'll come back to that a little bit when I talk about how people may move through the group differently based on whether they're coming in with strong emotion processing skills or not. I think I'll skip past this. We've been talking about this already, why experiential therapy in a group, but there's something so powerful about witnessing someone else's process and the impact it can have on your own understanding and your own felt sense. Here's another client experiences in their own words. You don't need to heal alone. I feel like doing it with other people speeds it up in a way, at least it did for me. I just noticed that everyone, after group, and especially if I was dealing with something, I always carried what they said for weeks on end, I would just remember, I would be home alone and just remember, oh yeah, she said that to me. And I guess I am great. You just carry it with you, right? So just as our clients will internalize our voice as the therapist over time, in this group, people internalize the words and the felt sense from other group members. It's quite beautiful. And another one, and I had sat there for 10 weeks and done the exact same thing, right? Been that person who watched someone get up at the front of the room and spill their guts all over the floor and then come back in that very vulnerable state and said nice things about them and genuinely said nice things about them. Not because I felt like I had to, or it was the right thing to do, or any of that. I didn't feel guilty about having to say something nice. It was I genuinely cared for the experience and what they had gone through. And so why wouldn't that be the same for me? So this is another phenomenon we see in this group, is that when you have sat there in your own body and felt your compassion in the face of another's pain, when you're the vulnerable one and others are being compassionate with you, we have individuals in this group who, because of their lived experience, they've learned to mistrust others. They don't trust niceties. They don't trust it when people are kind to them. They don't believe it. But when you have felt in your own body how heartbreaking it is to witness someone else's chair work, and now people are being nice to you, you remember how you felt, and it's much harder to dismiss it, right? Because you know how genuine it was for you. So there's a lot going on, I think, in this group. I want to take a moment just to talk about how we think this group may differentially impact different maladaptive emotion schemes. So we don't have research on this at this point. And again, our lots of research programs are beginning in different countries, which is exciting. One of the questions that Laura and I have is, does this group differentially impact shame, fear, and aloneness? So we think it's especially impactful for shame. Shame is a very social emotion. And when individuals share their shame and are seen and validated and supported and accepted, I think it's very, very powerful. So I think this group has a strong impact. At least we see it qualitatively on shame. Similarly, for coarse sadness or aloneness, when people just feel unable to connect to other human beings, when they feel fundamentally alone in the world. And again, this is often our neglected clients or clients who were neglected in childhood. I think what they experience in this group is a surprise at seeing the depth of internal emotion and internal richness in other human beings. And I think they begin to learn a different capacity for emotional richness inside that they may not have understood before because it hadn't been shared with them in childhood. Often folks who start in this place of internal emptiness or internal aloneness, they experience some sadness in the group as they truly come to understand what they have been missing. But it also gives them a sense of where they'd like to get to, that they'd like to begin to get in touch with their own internal worlds and open up to other people. And it's the opening up that's going to allow them to feel less alone in the world. Fear, we certainly work effectively with fear in this group. And I think especially when there's shame related to fear, so I'm ashamed of my anxiety, or I view my fears in the world as being weak, the shame element is also very impacted. But coarse fear itself, in terms of like a PTSD or having experienced an assault, we're not sure that this group would have any beneficial impact beyond what would happen in an individual therapy for pure fear, but we don't know. So this just comes from kind of our own hypothesis and what we see in the group. But anytime there's a shame element, I think it's quite impactful. Certainly individuals can do their own fear work in the group. We're just not sure if group adds substantially. We've talked about this already, how chair work is different in group as opposed to individually. The one thing I'll add, which we didn't mention, is it's quite important to identify how long you're going to spend in the chair work as the facilitator. And you never want to prioritize chair work over the group process. The group process piece is really important. And even 30 or 40 minutes, it sounds like a very long time, but it can go so quickly, and it can be very compelling to try to stay in the chair work to get to that resolution, to get to that activation of positive emotion. But it's really important for group safety and group cohesion that everyone has a chance to share what's happening in their bodies as they witness. And, as it's already been identified, that tends to evoke a lot of warmth and positive emotion in the client who's done the chair work. So don't run over it, and make sure you leave enough time for the group process. Oops, right. Okay, so this is a model that Laura and I have put together based on what we see, patterns we see in groups. So here we have the intake session. So I haven't talked about that a lot today, but we've talked a little bit about what we screen for. I will tell you that in the intake session, so I'm meeting someone for the first time, it's a brand new client to me, I do chair work in the intake session. I want them to have a sense of chair work. I want to know if they can differentiate critic from experiencing self. And I feel like this is important for informed consent. Describing chair work and doing a piece of chair work are very different. And I want someone to know that they feel they can tolerate this in a group before I accept them into group. Intake chair work tends to be fairly brief. It's not as deep. In the 4-day training that Laura and I do, we show an intake session actually. So we have an intake session. If we learn that this person has trouble with dysregulated emotions, we refer them on. This is not the right group. We refer them to another group, DBT, for example, or back to their individual therapist. Most people coming into group will follow the red line. They come in with productive emotion processing. Right? These are the, say if we have an 8 people in the group, we're looking for 6 of them anyway to come in with the capacity to feel and express their emotion. But we may accept 1 or 2. And if we think back to that matching principle where everyone in the group can look around and identify at least one other person that feels like they do or makes them go, oh, me too. Typically, if I have someone with low access to emotion or low emotion processing, I want 2 of them in the group because they will feel a bit different than those who express more easily. We determine our constellation and everyone is invited to the first group. Again, where we're focusing on moving from fear to relief. We're focusing on universality, creating hope, and gently increasing vulnerability over the course of the group. Those who have come in already able to productively process emotion in their chair work, they're likely to jump right into a self-critic task, whether it's a worry split or a contemptuous critic split. Those who are coming in and they really can't feel their own emotions, with them, we're more likely to end up in the chairs while either doing a focusing task, helping them simply go inside and come into contact with what's there, or very quickly we're going to end up in a self-interruption task. That's fine. Either of these are productive. And then we would have our final group. If the group members are continuing to a second round, what we often find is that those who did focusing or self-interruption work in the first round of chairs are now ready to do self-critic work. And those who did self-critic work often have identified a new marker, perhaps for unfinished business. That's the most common one in terms of where this critic has come from, or maybe processing a relational trauma like bullying that has happened earlier in their lives. So they may proceed with that task in the second round, and then we would end in a final group. In the second hour, so this is the group debrief, it's very important, ideally, in picking your 2 facilitators. One is very comfortable, in this case, with EFT. We would argue that this group, this process here, is really transferable to any experiential therapy. So we could be doing this with IFS or ADP, or any therapy where individuals end up in vulnerability in the chairs or in the individual therapy component. Okay, so in the second hour where we're debriefing, while one therapist should be very well versed in the individual therapy modality that you're going to use in this group, for us it's EFT, it's helpful if the other therapist has some experience in group process. Now, both of those areas of knowledge can be held in one therapist. When I work with a student, I know both. I know EFT, and I've also been trained in psychodynamic interpersonal therapy groups. So I have a lot of training in the group processes as well. In other groups, you may share this knowledge between 2 facilitators. But in the second hour, Laura and I are trying to map, I guess, a model for what we think is happening in this idea of marker-driven group interventions. And minimally, we think there's 3 levels that we need to be watching for in terms of marker-driven group interventions. So one is the group level, where we're always focused on developing and maintaining cohesion between all group members, a sense of belonging for everyone in the group. Then we're watching the interpersonal level, right? So between any two group members, and we want to help people spontaneously and genuinely speak directly to one another from primary emotion. And of course, if conflict or tension arises between two group members, we're attending to that and helping them move from secondary emotion to primary emotion expression to attempt to, if not resolve, articulate what's happening in a clear and non-judgmental way. And then we're attending to the intrapersonal level, so what's happening in one individual person's body. And at the individual level, we're helping people to access, differentiate, and transform their own core emotion. We're doing all of this while engaging in meaning making and focusing on here and now process, what's happening now in this group, in your own body, as you react to yourself, as you react to other group members. So beginning to map different markers or different interventions at the group interpersonal and intrapersonal level is something that we're interested in. So here's, I guess, some examples of the 3 levels of focus. I think I won't go into a lot of detail. I've just kind of spoken to some of this in the former slide. Very quickly, our outcome data. We're just getting students involved now to reanalyze the data. This analysis was done, as you can see, about 4 years ago when we had about 5 years of data was the data set we were working with. We now have 10 years of data. I need to update this actually because we did represent some data at the last ICEFT conference, and thankfully it mirrored these analyses, which was great. So we use the Beck Depression Inventory, and we do see that scores reduce significantly, both over one round of chair work and independently over a second round of chair work. So we're seeing some nice drops in the BDI from the high moderate range to the minimal range over 2 rounds of therapy, which is great. We also use the Beck Anxiety Inventory to measure anxiety changes across the group, and we see decreases from the high moderate to the low moderate range over the course of both rounds. And we also take a look at emotion regulation through the DERS, difficulties in emotion regulation scale, and we see that the scores decrease significantly over round 1 and over round 2. So people are moving from kind of a clinical range to the almost normal range for university students by the end of both rounds. There's other data that we've collected, the session feelings questionnaire, and I'm forgetting the other one in this moment, where there's a mix, there's more qualitative data. Neither Laura nor I have primary research duties as part of our jobs. This has been something we've done on our own time, and we just haven't had the bandwidth or the numbers to analyze that data. But now that our numbers are increasing, again, we're working with some students who may begin to take this on as part of master's research projects. Okay, and I'll come back to questions in a moment. I will, for those who are interested, we do offer, Laura and I, a 4-day training. It's neither one of these, my apologies. Oh yeah, no, it is. It's the top one. So the top one, we offer a 4-day training institute on EFT for group. And our goal, assuming that you're coming in feeling comfortable with either an individual experiential therapy or a group process, is that by the end of the training, you could leave and run your own group. I mean, that's our hope. It's very applied. It's very practical. And these are just some other trainings that I offer on EFT fundamentals. But I'll bring your attention here under the therapist resources. You'll find the manual for our group. It's posted on my website and you can find it there. And under the self-help resources on my website, that's where you'll find the Focus on Emotions blog that I mentioned earlier. And of course, I got references at the end, so I'm happy to send these along. So let's stop sharing and see if there are questions. And thank you for the additional time.
Wow, thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Great. I think also, like Christina, this is very powerful. I think that is clearly necessary, and maybe why not the future of the EFT? Because this part, no, of the group that in the individual have very limitations, that this kind of welling, no, like you are not alone, you are this is normal. A patient yesterday asked me but about her inner critic, but this is normal. I mean, this is so. Yeah, well, I tell you that this is very normal. All human beings, but it's not the same if you have the example, no, the experiential, and yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I
very
agree.
connected with want of loneliness. It makes sense, no, to share this process of transform that.
Yeah, it's very, it's, you know, it's, as you say, it can be more accessible to clients because it can be less expensive. I will say that this group, to be transparent, does not tend to be a money maker for the therapist. You have to guard your time wisely if you want it to be equivalent to individual. Because, well, it depends on how you set it up. In our context, we don't charge for the intake sessions because I just don't charge for the intake sessions. Some practices do charge for group intakes, you know, for DBT, for different groups. So that will depend on your practice setting. And then, of course, you are doing some time before and after group to prep a little bit and note. So anyway, maybe I'm not the best business person, so that could be part of the problem. You certainly can break even with this group. You could probably make money from the group, but you can really make it more accessible for clients who are paying a lower fee to attend a 2-hour group. And that part's quite lovely. And the bonding is, like, it's really heartwarming, actually. This is my favorite part of my practice. It's a lot of work to organize the group, and I love it. It fills me with hope and compassion and awe. So anyway, I think that's sometimes important for us as well, is things that sustain our hearts as therapists, because we hear a lot of pretty tough stuff.
Yeah. I can imagine. So, Lauren, you have a question? Sorry.
Awesome. Right. I love that. We ask them. So a couple different things happen. One is the chair work at intake is very informative. So when I'm doing chair work, thank you, Francisco. When I'm doing chair work in the intake, I want to see how someone reacts. So if someone moves into the critic chair and they are annihilating themselves, like it's really strong loathing or it's hatred, and then I move them to this side and there is no capacity for self-compassion at all, there's a little yellow flag in the back of my mind, because sometimes when individuals can have no compassion for self, they may struggle to also have compassion for others. So I'm watching for that. And the other is we always ask in intake, and I ask something along the lines of, listen, when you see others in emotional pain, people can have very different reactions based on their upbringing, based on, or even what they've experienced in their lives. So sometimes when I see someone in pain, my heart, like one person's heart might break for them and they feel so compassionate and warm. Someone else might think, oh, you need help, but I need it more because I've had so little support in my life that when I see someone else in pain and they're getting help, like I just need to take some of that help for me. Others might even show up in ways where it's like, I hate that about myself. And so I actually hate it in you as well. Like, where do you land? What happens in your body? And I have had people say to me all three of those. So if someone says to me, no, I think people are weak when they cry. I see no room for it. I don't like it that I cry, and I think they're weak. I'm gentle, I'm compassionate, but it's not the right group. And we talk quite frankly about why, how hurtful that can be to receive for themselves and how hurtful that can be for someone else to receive. And that I recommend a bit of work to find compassion for self. And then they're welcome to come back, right? So we talk about it quite openly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. No, they're not. Many are, but it's not a requirement. If we invite someone into the group who has quite, as Robert Elliott would say, fragile process. So maybe their resiliency is low, right? Or their shame is high, or there's, in English we'd say like a borderline quality. I don't like that diagnosis, borderline personality disorder, personally. I much prefer to talk about complex trauma, because complex trauma explains why they're demonstrating traits that have been labeled borderline personality. And I don't think it has to be forever. I think if we cure the complex trauma or heal the trauma, they stop looking borderline. But I use that as a short term, like a shorthand. So if we have someone who has that kind of process, I would prefer them to be in individual therapy at the same time, so that they have extra support for their nervous system, because this group really is evocative, and I want to make sure that they can make sense of what's happening in their body. But someone who's good at managing their own internal experience, they don't have to be an individual at the same time. We do tell everyone, if you're really overwhelmed between groups, please don't wait the whole week. Please reach out and we'll fit you in, even if it's just for 15 or 30 minutes. It's very rare that people take us up on that, but we always offer it. And if it is going to happen, it's more likely to happen, we find, after the first 2 chair work groups, where sometimes, even though we've done a bit of chair work at intake, it's not always so deep, the chair work. And people are often surprised by how deeply they go in their emotions, even with preparation. And so sometimes after the first or second group, someone may reach out to say, hey, could I talk to you? I'm feeling an awful lot. And we might see them for 15 minutes right after the group, or we might schedule a time to see them for 15 or 30 minutes, largely to help them regulate and make sense of what's happening, and to hold hope that this is actually helpful over time, even though it's hard right now when we're in it. Yeah, but again, that's one of the rare. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. Something I'm curious about is, when I go into my own shame, like if I'm an observing member and I feel shame that's triggered by witnessing someone else, and then in that moment, I feel compassion for them, right? So it's my shame towards me, but compassion towards them. Does the target of my emotion matter in changing my own internal wiring? I don't know. I suspect it does, but I would love to see a way to tease that part in research. For those of you who know Jason Charbonnet from Australia, it's not published yet, but he did a super cool study where he did a group like this and he wired everybody up to measure their galvanic skin response. And you could see the skin response of the chairperson, you know, increasing as they went into deep emotion, and then the skin response of everybody in the group. Like, it was super cool. And there's just been some challenges in writing it up, but Laura and I keep saying, like, we want to reference your paper. You have to publish this. So yeah. Yes. Yeah. And his student, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name right now. It's because I'm terrible with names. Her face, long, dark hair. Anyway, she's doing her dissertation on, she's going to do process analysis of a group and do the line by line coding and try to look for moments in the change processes in the group, especially the group debrief. Not so much the chair work, because that's been studied, but really what's happening in the group debrief and what loads positively on change process. So I can't wait to see that. It's like super cool. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Totally. So the group from Romania, Julia, yes, I think it's Julia. Oh my gosh, somebody else help me on the group chat. That's what they do. So they're very excited to kind of connect with this larger EFTG community, because what they've done for, I don't know, 10 plus years is created their own sort of structure as a supervisory model where people are participating in an EFT group. So what I think one of the things we decided to do in our last larger international group meeting was to start creating times where we'd come together and groups would have time to talk more about what they're doing. And I think they're quite interested in sharing. But if you want to email me, I could certainly put you in touch with her to find out more about what she's doing. I think, yeah, and I think this would be amazing for groups or for training settings. Obviously, depending on the culture of your training institute, what you need to know is that you're going to get to know a lot about each other's lives and your core pain and your core wounds. So you need to have a training setting that is supportive of that and finds that appropriate and not inappropriate and problematic boundaries. And training settings can vary a lot, but you'd need to watch for small community politics or boundaries, because really you're going to learn a lot about one another. So that's the only caution, but the experiential learning would be profound. Yeah. I've actually had a request to start a group for therapists. And this is a helpful reminder because I dropped that thread. And I think that's something I'd be very interested in. My preference at this point would probably be to bring in clinicians who don't know one another from different settings, but I'm cautious. Some would say I'm overly cautious on boundaries. So, you know, that's me, but I respect where different people show up. But I wouldn't do this with my team yet. I would be a bit concerned. I feel like this is something the Norwegians would totally do with their team. So different places in the world tackle it differently. I don't know if they're doing, I can't remember if they're doing research on their supervisory groups or not. They're certainly actively using the supervisory groups, but it's Romania. So if you want, send me an email and just remind me of the context, and I'm happy to put you in touch. I'm sure she'd be delighted to talk about what they're doing. They're very excited about what they're doing, and pretty cool. It's also where the next ISEFT conference is going to be. They're hosting. It's going to be in Romania in 2 years. So FYI. Okay, awesome. Great questions, Lauren.
Well, I don't know, Gemma, we are in the last minutes, so, and then we can finish. You've been very generous, but Gemma, see what I have.
My pleasure.
Really quick question. It was about one diagram, probably because I'm translating at the same time, so I cannot do a lot of things together at the same time. So the people who has a low regulation of emotion, on the diagram, it was like you can do focusing and a self-compassion work.
Yes.
So this is something that you do on individual work. And then if they are prepared, then you go to the next group.
Oh, no, sorry. So
No.
these are for people, and it tends to be for people not with low regulation of emotion. So not those who are dysregulated, we refer them out, but people with low access to emotion. So they're over-regulated. Okay. So in the group, when they volunteer to do their chair work, they may not actually be able to do critic work. They may not be able to even connect enough with their internal experience to differentiate the critic voice, and they may have no idea what they're feeling in their body. So instead, with those folks, when they volunteer, we may just do focusing. And focusing for them may be profoundly vulnerable in front of other people, trying to go inside and not only be aware of what they feel, but to speak it to another human being, because this is what they do not do. So their chair work may look different, and it may look largely just like focusing. Or if they're able to connect with their internal experience, but it's hard to let the emotion out, we may end up doing a self-interruption task. But the group still tends to respond quite warmly and positively.
Okay, so it's on the same group, but they do a different task.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. That's it. It's on Solis. Thank you.
Well, so thank you very much. And Sarah, let me know if we can have the slides.
Yes.
So and the links for the trainers. And I think that you told me that in next year, maybe in German, there will be a workshop. I don't know
That's right.
Online too, or.
So we're actually we've got 2 trainings next year. One will be in a North American time zone at the end of April. And Laura and I will run the Institute, the 4-day training through my practice. But then we're going to do a virtual training in Germany with Lars and Imka's group. And that's going to be in November. We've just set the dates and I don't remember them, but it's going to be in November, and they're preparing marketing materials now. And they've already said that I can forward the marketing materials to you. So that will be in a much closer time zone. But both of those dates will be available: April in Eastern time and November in I don't know if you're in the same time zone as Munich or not. I'm assuming it's a bit different, but it'll be fairly close.
Yes.
We're going to open it to Germans first, right, through their institute, but I think they don't anticipate all the spaces being filled, but they will open it to, I think, the German group first.
Okay.
We can take up to 32, so I don't think they expect that it will be filled, but I'll just put that out there for what it's worth.
Okay, perfect. Anyway,
it's going to be in English, and they're not planning to use live translators because they've said that their German group is also very conversant in English, so it will be in English. So yes, both. Laura speaks a bit of German. I sadly speak none, so it will. It'll be in English. Yeah.
Okay. Well, little by little, this is a very important step. So. Well, keep in contact, and then I make sure that the rest of community have all the information, all these things to, if they have this interest as well to this kind of training. And again, thank you very much, Sarah.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and amazing questions. And I love the excitement and the enthusiasm. It's contagious.
Okay, so
right. I wish you well then, everyone. I'll send you an email with the slides, etc. And I welcome any questions that you may have. And thank you for your time, everyone.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.